Yes. Welcome back to another edition of the Big Dig Live. I'm your host, or one of your hosts, Michael Stewart. Over to my right, as I look at it, would be Lamar Miller, and right below us right now, but not in stature, Tyler West. So, welcome all that come in. Today is, let me get my thing here, April 23rd of 2023. And guys, I'll just hello to you guys. We'll start with Tyler. How was your week, and how are things been going for you?
The week was pretty good. Went to Chicago, as you know, and no offense to anybody that's from Chicago, nice place to visit. Wouldn't want to live there. Um, Plane came down at O'Hare, and it was snowing on Monday. Whenever I arrived, fortunately, it wasn't accumulating. And I'll admit, I was a little apprehensive, a little anxious about going. And I know we're not supposed to be anxious, but I have worked from a home office for about 11 years now, and I've worked for other companies, but even those companies since then are relatively small companies, and so anytime I did go into the office, which was extremely rare, there was probably never more than a dozen people there, usually more like half of that. And so, the office was, it was never rambunctious. It was never crowded. It was never really noisy or anything like that. And so, I'm part of, again, Cisco for the second time in my life, large global organization with thousands upon thousands of employees. And I knew going to this office that there were going to be hundreds of people there. I mean, just the group that I was going to be with was going to be in the realm of about 80 to 90 people. And I was a little apprehensive, being in office with that many people. Not that I'm, not scared of like COVID or anything. It's just I'm not accustomed to it. And it turned out to be really good. Honestly, I've never worked with a better bunch of people in my life. No offense to the people that I've worked with before, but it's the truth. It's just honestly, it was really enjoyable for the time that I was there. Now, 2 days there, I was there from Monday afternoon to Thursday morning, so 2 full days I was there. I was ready to come home. I had kind of had it up to here, even though it was enjoyable, it was challenging.
Sure.
So I was ready to come home. So, but that was my week.
Cool. Did you get to eat any unique places or anything while you was up there?
No, I did get some Chicago deep dish. They brought it into the office. The first night was interesting because there was a bunch of them that wanted to go to this pub that was nearby, which I was not, objecting to that. But the problem was we were going to have to walk like 4 blocks to get there from the hotel we were staying at. And like I said, it was snowing on Monday. It was in the 30s, and 30s in windy Chicago is not like the 30s here.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there was 5 or 6 of us that decided we did not want to walk. And there was a really nice restaurant there at the hotel. And so I had a very beautiful black cod dish. Guy beside me had a filet. And we just, the 5 or 6 of us just sat there and enjoyed ourselves and laughed and talked. And we probably sat at that table for like 3 hours. The waiter was ready to get rid of us, but we took it well.
Yeah, there you go. Lamar, How about you, man? How was your week?
Yeah, man, it was a good week. Lots of working here at home and at work. Just trying to get the spring started here, but the weather turned cold on us here just yesterday, so it's hard. It was a little harder to work outside, with
Yeah,
that.
I got outside today, this afternoon, and mowed the grass and about froze to
Yeah,
death. I
yeah,
had long pants on, short sleeve shirt, but man, my hands were cold. I was like, man,
yeah.
it's ridiculous. Is this what they call the blackberry winter? I guess,
Uh,
or something.
I have
Uh,
no idea.
but
I
yeah,
know I want to have some groundhog for dinner about right now. Puxatawny Phil. I'm done with
there you
that
go.
boy.
yeah, exactly. Uh, yeah, so Ryder, he got his new belt, and so he is a red stripe, which is 1 degree away from black. So we're very proud of him, and Jen is doing good, and in her dance stuff. And I went with her Friday. We went down to Lost River Cave for a little field day or whatever, or I guess we call it the field trip, I guess, for her class and a couple of classes, I guess it was, but she wanted me to go and ride the boat with her, so we did the boat thing, and it was fun time. It was neat. I always loved caves and stuff like that, so it was neat to spend that time with her. So, but yeah, good week and ready to hit another one. We are 4 weeks out from being done
Mm,
for the summer with school, and that's
yeah,
summer's starting to fill up with different things for us and all of us. But we were talking off the air a while ago. We got Mother's Day and Father's Day coming up, which I'll just tell everybody who might listen that we will be taking those dates off to spend with our families. So just kind of mark that on your calendar if you wish, for those who come in and are regulars or people who come back and watch us on replays or over at Rumble, whatever. Shout out right now to Mom. Thanks for coming in and watching, and Miranda and Eileen. So we've got, as of right now, 3 people in. We might get some more later. And, we're constantly trying to figure out new ways to promote the channel, and a lot of that's going to be through word of mouth. So if you're friends with people on Facebook or YouTube, or well, not YouTube per se, but friends with people on Facebook, by all means, you're free to share, what we're doing. I'm doing a miserable job at getting out an advertisement on Facebook midweek. That's not been happening like it should, but I did put one out today on Facebook. Feel free to share that. We want to get as many people in as possible. Just to have a good discussion together. So, but we're glad everybody is here, and so we are picking up on part 3 of the studies of the Gospels. This is a more of a chronological approach. And like I've said in I know probably the last 2 episodes, I really have enjoyed it because it kind of puts things in a unique and true perspective. Maybe that we wouldn't look at if we were just going through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Bada bing, bada boom, right through them. So it's
right.
kind of puts all the events in order, and also it's been really a really cool study, in my opinion. So as we've been doing over the past week or two, we start out with a little question. And the question I have for this week, and then is how did the Gospels move from event to oral tradition to written sources to the Gospels as we find them in our Bible today? So chew on that a minute. I'm anxious to see what y'all might have to say about that.
Well, what I would say is, like, we're not, well, probably, like, we're not writing down our uh our travels and stuff right now. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So history isn't really written as it happens because it hadn't happened. You know what I'm saying? So like if there's a huge thing that's fixing to happen in my life, I'm not going to be writing about it as it's unfolding. It would be later, after everything had happened, that I would write all this unbelievable stuff down.
So would you argue that kind of it's more of a memoir than it is?
I don't know about that, but I just don't think that it could have been. It could have been written as it was unfolding because these things were happening, and they were just like, man, this is awesome. These awesome things are happening, and then it was later on that they were able to say, man, I've got to write all this stuff down, all these wonderful things that happen. I need to write all this down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of my opinion of why, there may be a years of difference between when these things happen and when they were written, because you're not really writing your history as it's happening. You write it after these things have happened, and you write them down to share with everyone.
And I was going to friendly argue with you about what about someone who journals every day? But even if someone journals every day, it's still in the past. It's
True,
not
true, yeah,
in the actual moment of. So,
right.
Tyler, you got any comments on that?
Yeah. So here's what we don't know, which is a lot. Could there have been some instances of journaling during Jesus' ministry? Well, sure. We don't know that, but that's reasonable speculation that there could have been. Did they write everything down? Probably not. I mean, that would have been nuts because, as we know from John, had all those things been written down, even the world could not contain the books. I mean, so let's keep that in mind. So I do think that the bulk of it was oral. If I had to speculate, and to answer your mother, probably not. I would dare say we know that Mark was probably the first one that was written, and Mark was not one of the apostles. We believe that Mark was a young man. We believe that there is within Mark's gospel itself a very brief reference to Mark. We're not there yet. It happens at the arrest in the garden. But we do believe that Mark was around them, because we know that it wasn't just Jesus and these 12 dudes running around everywhere. It was Jesus, it was these 12 dudes, and a fair number of other people that were going with him from place to place. And sometimes they probably stayed at home, and sometimes they went with them. And so it was just, it was this barrage of people. And Mark was probably very often among those people. So did Mark actually observe a number of these things? Most likely so. And so he could write about some of them from memory. But I also have to believe that, these guys weren't in silos. They were, with each other, around each other, after all these things took place, communicating with each other. So I've got to believe that Mark consulted with some of the others and said, hey, when Jesus did X, what do you remember about it? And so you've got that kind of thing going on that eventually produces Mark's relatively brief, very focused gospel. There's not a lot of detail in Mark. And I think you have the same kind of thing that goes on with Matthew and Luke even so much as says that he did research and that he talked to other people. And obviously with the story of the birth of Christ, there's he had to have spent some time with even Mary. We don't know. Now, Matthew, of course, was one of the apostles, one of the 12. So he was, with him during the ministry. We don't know at what point in time that Joseph, Jesus' father, that most likely Joseph had passed away prior to Jesus' crucifixion, but we don't know at what point. Could Joseph have been alive during part of the ministry? Maybe. So maybe Matthew even talked to Joseph some about those early days and got some information from him. So you have a lot of that collaboration, I believe, that went on, especially with Mark, Matthew, and Luke. John's a little bit different. John was written much later. I believe that John depended a lot on memory as reinforced by the Holy Spirit. That's the way that I like to state it. It was the things that he experienced, the things that he knew, but he didn't really have anybody to collaborate with when he was putting that together. It was so late. So it's a little bit different with John. But then eventually these all get written down, they get copied. And then to answer the question of how they became, part of what we read today, is there was a council. We won't go into the details of all that, but there was a council where they decided on what's called the canon of Scripture. And, it was based on a number of different criteria. And that's how Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were accepted as part of that canon, and some of the others were rejected.
Gotcha. I was thinking about this, and maybe I'll just pose the question. We always consider, or we always state, that the first church was in Acts. But in essence, couldn't a person say that Jesus and the 12 doing their thing, and these other folks, that was the first church?
I would tend to say no.
Based on
well, again, for if you want to get really technical about it, Jesus had to die and be resurrected before
that's a
there
good point.
could truly be salvation. So
Right.
That's a good point. Yep.
Yeah, they did have fellowship.
Oh, absolutely.
So
they had koinonia, which that is basically a fellowshipping of believers. They were believers. They were gathering together.
Yeah.
But they were still, at least those guys, they were still very much Jews.
Right.
So
with a lot of Jewish belief.
Absolutely.
With the outlier of that, I guess, being Jesus saying who he was. I wonder
But that was not a contradiction to Jewish belief.
No, but for him to be the Messiah, it was a contradiction, because the Jewish people to this day don't, believe he hasn't come yet.
Well, they believe wrong, but
well, yeah. Yeah.
No offense to my Jewish friends, but it is not a contradiction to Jewish belief. It's just that they do not recognize him as the Messiah. They're still looking for the Messiah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave that there. I like these questions because it does make you think, for sure. And it's like, ooh. So when we left off last week, we were on the cusp of the birth of Jesus. And like a crazy man, I gave a little of the teaser away. But I will refer to Tyler to kind of do a little quick overview, and then we will pick up with this study today. So Tyler, take it away.
Yeah, so basically where we left off, let me go back and see my note here. Yeah, so where we left off, we basically had a couple of things. Number one, we had touched on Matthew and Joseph's visit by the angel after Mary was pregnant, and that what we see is that visit from the angel rolls right into the statement of the birth. It does not cover any of the travel to Bethlehem or anything like that with Matthew. Luke covers all that. So what we have after Joseph's visit is we dive into Luke's section where Mary visits Elizabeth, and then we covered the birth of John, and then Luke also covers the travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem for the census. And so we find Joseph and Mary in Bethlehem at the time of the census, and she is great with child, and quite frankly, is about to pop. So that's where we wind up. So if you want to bring up, and let me pull. I'm going back and forth. There you go. So pull up the document that we had earlier with those three side by side, please. Beautiful. So with Matthew, we have that culmination of the visit from the angel to Joseph, and makes the promise and tells him name's going to be Jesus, and so the end of that is that he did not have relations with her. He kept her a virgin until she gave birth to a son. That's simply what we see stated there in Matthew. And that's really just the first part of verse 25. There's a reason that we break that verse into a first part and a second part and don't cover the second part. Luke gives us a little more information, because with Luke, we've had this whole travel to Bethlehem that's covered. And so we find them in Bethlehem, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Now, one of these images that we get oftentimes is this, wooden barn. That was not what they had. By our understanding, most of the, if you will, places they had for cattle and everything, they were actually caves. And so you would set up boundaries in a cave. So most likely they were literally in a cave. That was their version of a barn. And so you have this little feeding trough, and that's what they've got available. So they probably put some straw in the feeding trough and some cloths, and that's where Jesus winds up.
Yeah, and the topography of that area is very mountainous and hilly.
Very hilly for sure. It's there's some mountains around, but it's really a lot more hilly, and there's a number of caves and everything, and that's generally where you found cattle and stuff would be kept at night. And John's, of course, John's is less more about the event, but I wanted to pull this one out because John's really is kind of where we get this idea of what the incarnation, that's the word that we often use for it, but the incarnation really is. And the word Jesus, as we saw from our first introduction of John, the word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory. Glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. And so that's the thing I want to make sure that we don't miss here, is the significance of this event, that Jesus is born, and in this one little verse in each one of these gospels, we have one of the most amazing things that's happened in all the history of mankind, is that the Son of God became flesh and dwelt among us as a child, not as a king, but as this lowly child born in a cave, and not laid in some grand bassinet or anything like that, but in this dirty little wooden manger, with some straw and just some loose. And that's how the Son of God, the King of Kings, came into this world.
Yeah.
The most humble way possible.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
While you were reading, we were going through those each block there. I went back and I read it. Incongruency, but kept her a virgin until she gave birth to a son, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. Read that one, and then read the next one in context, and it's like it flows so perfectly together.
Yeah.
the continuation of the story. And that's why I think it's another reason why it's so important to take a look at the study of the Gospels in the chronological, because I mean that's when you read that like that, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story.
I agree.
And how it's put together.
I agree. So let's pull up the next section, because we're think of this as taking the record needle and just bringing it across, because now that was nice and dramatic and wonderful and gorgeous, but let's deal with some facts now. So this is probably the best time, in my opinion, to introduce the genealogy section. Now that Jesus is born, let's look at his lineage now that he's come into this world. And so Matthew and Luke both cover genealogies, but it gets really interesting, and they cover it in a little bit of a different way. So Matthew does a little bit of an introduction to the genealogy, and it's simply the record of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. But Luke does the bulk of the genealogy. He does more than what Matthew does, because Luke covers the genealogy from Adam to Abraham, whereas Matthew does not. And what's interesting about Luke's, if you're sitting there reading it in your Bible, you're going to notice very quickly that it does not look like the way it does on the screen. And the reason we do that is because Matthew's genealogy flows from the oldest to the newest. And so to align that, we have to literally take Luke's and reverse it, because Luke's, when you're reading it in the scripture, it runs from Jesus all the way back to Adam. So we're going to start it with Adam, and we simply kind of modified the way that it's structured. It's all the same words. It's just done in reverse. So, we got Adam, the son of God. We've got Seth, the son of Adam. Enosh, the son of Seth. Canaan, the son of Enosh. Mahalalel, the son of Canaan. Jared, the son of Mahalalel. Enoch, the son of Jared. Methuselah. What do we know? Do we know any? What trivia do we know about Methuselah?
Oldest man in the Bible.
As far as we know by record, he was the oldest man to ever live. Methuselah
969.
Yep. Methuselah was the son of Enoch, and Lamech, the son of Methuselah, Noah, the son of Lamech. So Noah was Methuselah's grandson.
Yep.
What else is interesting is how old did you say Methuselah was?
969.
Okay. Now, do you know what year Methuselah died?
2017? No, seriously, I don't know.
The year.
It was the year of the flood. Yeah.
The year of the flood.
He died right before the flood.
Or
you think is
died in the flood? May have died in the flood. We don't know.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that that is the year that Methuselah died, was the year of the flood.
Yeah.
So Noah, the son of Lamech, Shem, the son of Noah, Arphaxad, the son of Shem, Canaan, the son of Arphaxad, Shelah, the son of Canaan, Heber, the son of Shelah, Peleg, the son of Eber, Ru, the son of Peleg, Sereg, the son of Ru, Nahor, the son of Sereg, Terah, the son of Nahor, and Abraham, the son of Terah. Other than Noah and Abraham, nothing really dramatic in there. I mean, Adam, all that. But there's it's interesting just putting together this lineage, and for the most part, it aligns with what we see in the Old Testament. There's a couple of discrepancies here and there, but nothing of any consequence. Where it gets really interesting is when we get into the section that's parallel between Matthew and Luke. So if we go through this, we'll find there's not anything that's really dramatic, in the first part where we go from Abraham on down to David, because it's a fairly straight line. So Um, yeah, we got Abraham. I'm not going to read through all of these, but the things that we find out, in here is we've got Abraham, we've got Isaac, we've got Jacob, then we got Judah. Of course, we know Jesus, Lion of the tribe of Judah. David came from Judah's line. Um, we've got Perez, Hezron, Ram. Now we do have a discrepancy here, and so if you look in Luke's, it says that this Admin was the son of Ram, and then Aminadab was the son of Admin, whereas Matthew says that Ram was the father of Aminadab. So we've got this little discrepancy with this guy Admin and Luke that frankly doesn't seem to appear anywhere. There's a couple of other sections you can go to. There's one in Ruth that's got a very small section of genealogy that basically goes straight from Ram to Aminadab, and this person Admin is not mentioned. We also have a couple of genealogies in Kings and Chronicles that cover this as well. The best speculation that we can make here is that Admin, this may have been what is sometimes referred to as a Levirate marriage. This is where, in some cases, a husband dies before they have children. And so the Admin may have been a second husband in this case. And that's the way that basically it was tracked. But we don't really know. And these are not things to be overly concerned with. But, if you're reading it here and you were to line it up like this, clearly you're going to see this discrepancy come into play. But going on down, we've got Salmon, we've got Boaz. Of course, if we read the story of Ruth, we learn about Boaz. The interesting thing about Boaz that Matthew brings out is who was Boaz's wife. Salmon was the father of Boaz by Look on the Matthew side. Did I lose you?
Ruth.
Salmon was the father. Yeah, it's right there about 3 lines down on what you're looking at. Salmon was the father of Boaz by
Rahab.
Who was Rahab? Rahab was the harlot in Jericho.
Okay.
Mom said Ruth.
Yeah, but Rahab was when they went in to Jericho, and you remember the spies?
Right.
Well, Rahab was that harlot.
She took them in, right?
Took them in, let them back out, and then basically deceived the people in Jericho.
I remember that now, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So then you got Boaz, Obed, Jesse, down to David. Okay. So now we're down to David, and then we've got the lineage from David. Now this is where it gets really interesting. So the lineage from David on down to Joseph is where we've got this huge divergence between Matthew and Luke. It doesn't diverge. It doesn't diverge really greatly anywhere else. But here, there's almost no way to line these up. And so the speculation, there's a couple of explanations for this, both of which are speculation. We don't know which one it is or if it's either one of these. The original speculation is that Luke actually carries Mary's lineage as her lineage from David down. and Matthew carries Joseph lineage from David down because both of them were descendants of David. Okay. Now, that's all well and good, and that may be the way it is. And if that is the case, the reason that would have been done with Joseph, because we talked about previously that Matthew was most likely written with an eye for the Jews, and that patriarchal lineage would be important. But as we know, if that is the case, that's also not the blood lineage.
Right.
Okay. Whereas if Luke's is Mary's line, then that would be the blood lineage from David. But the other, and again, there are a lot of scholars that disagree with that. A fair number of scholars do agree with that. There is some speculation says that that whole idea of Luke being Mary's lineage was really pushed early by the Catholic Church and pushing for the divinity of Mary, which we know that doesn't fly. But we that's again a lot of this is speculation. The other explanation, which is a good explanation, I think it holds some merit, is that Matthew's lineage is what we would call the royal lineage. And you can track it pretty accurately through Kings, through Chronicles, somewhat through Ezra to a certain extent. And that is that, these are the ones that actually became the kings after David. And it all tracks pretty accurately up to just about the deportation to Babylon. So it's a reasonable assumption there. Whereas just because you were part of the royal lineage, that did not always mean that was the lineage that was being tracked genetically. Okay. And so they, the people that believe that Matthew held the royal lineage believe that Luke was following the actual physical genetic lineage.
Gotcha.
And it's interesting because if you look at just the generations in Luke, there are far more generations mentioned in Luke. And then you actually will, especially when you get right around the deportation to Babylon, like if you look down to where it talks about Jehoshaphat, Joram, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, right there in that area. Well, actually, I apologize. Right after Josiah, and it talks about Jeconiah and his brothers. There's actually a huge area that's skipped there in terms of the actual kings of Judah. And so they literally skipped like 2 generations because when you look at it, the people that were the kings would not actually have been the ones that should have been the kings. And this was due to some very evil and murderous behavior around that time that caused a lot of problems. And so that's what could be going on here, is that Matthew's tracking that royal lineage. These are the ones that should either were the kings or should have been the kings of Judah, all the way down through this line by their royal lineage. And the royal lineage gets a little crazy. It's not always this firstborn son, or it's not always, it could be a nephew. It could be, and that's kind of the way things, could go in that royal lineage. Whereas again, I think Luke's would be the genetic, the actual physical lineage. And then, the one thing you get down to in this, you have one section here where you've got this dude, Shealtiel and Zerubbabel. And that's the only point where it seems the lines may converge back together. And it's possible that that's the case. and a lot of people assume that that's the case. But it may not be the case, even though, yes, it seems odd that you would have a father and son pair that would have the same names and but be two different. That's actually not as uncommon as you would think.
Mhm.
In that you'll see a lot of repetition of names, and even in a particular order. Um, Again, they're part of the Davidic line, but they could be two completely different sets of people, and that would seem to hold true probably with Shealtiel's father not matching, between the two, as well as the sons of Zerubbabel not matching between the two.
Right. I
And then
always
you go
let
ahead.
me just interject this real quick. When
Sure.
it, excuse me, when I get in, you know how he set out sometimes to have a New Year's resolution. I'm gonna read the Gospels. I'm gonna start off reading the Gospels. Man, when I hit these chapters, it's like it just hits molasses. But I will say that the way that we're looking at it here tonight, it does make it more bearable, I guess. As far as the common Joe reader, I would say.
Well, and to me, there is an element to this. Yes, the genealogies are just one of those things you just kind of have to some extent grit your teeth and get through it. But the authors had a purpose for
That's
these.
right. Yeah.
Right.
And I think to some extent there was a little bit of a hidden purpose in them, which I'll reflect on when we get to the end of them. Um, but yeah, it's just like Leviticus when you start reading through all the laws and here's what you do for the lepers and it's just like
Mhm.
it gets a little crazy sometimes. But again, there's a reason it's there. Like with much of the Old Testament stuff, like that, a lot of those laws, a lot of those processes and procedures were actually foreshadowing of many of the things that Christ would do to basically fulfill all of that law. So, and the only other point as we get through this is you'll see very easily when you look at this on the screen that, Luke has several more generations than what Matthew shows. And that also kind of hints towards Matthew following the royal line, which is one of the supporting things for that, because it would not always follow, an actual genetic line. But the only other place we get to is that we see this where Jacob, in Matthew, Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. But then we've got, in Luke, it says Joseph was the son of Eli, or some versions may say Heli, Heli. And again, if you're following the belief that Luke is Mary's lineage, then that would mean that Eli or Heli was actually Mary's father,
Mhm.
but that Joseph, being her husband, would be considered the son of Mary's father. That's really where that comes into play. The other track is that, again, if you're following that royal lineage, then it may have been that Jacob would have been, and how Matthew would have researched this, I'm not exactly sure, because we have after that deportation to Babylon, around the time of just right after Josiah, a lot of your historical records get a little jacked up, just because you've been deported to a foreign country. Lots of stuff was destroyed in Jerusalem. So you're probably missing a few things
Right.
in that respect. So we don't know the exact explanation, but suffice it to say that regardless of the case, what's important to understand here first is that that Jesus was the son of David.
Mm.
Jesus was in both the genetic and the royal lineage of David. You know, the other thing
Let me say
that
this,
I
and the
go
novice
ahead.
reader, the novice person who would hear what you just said, well, I thought Jesus was the son of Joseph. Okay. When you refer to he is the son of David, can you explain that to the common Joe reader or hearer?
Well, I mean, just saying the son of basically means he's a descendant of. So let me change that. Jesus is the descendant of David, regardless of how you look at it. Royal, genetic, he's the descendant of David. And that's important because that ties right into more than one of God's promises and prophecies in the Old
Right.
Testament.
Yeah.
That's what's ultimately important about that. You've got those things that talk about establishing the throne of David forever. You've got a variety of things like that play into making sure that there's a clear understanding that Jesus is a descendant of David. The other thing that I find in the genealogies that is to me is interesting is the number of very colorful people that are mentioned there. They were all in there, good or bad. I mean, you had wicked kings in that lineage. Now we can't track that so much in Luke because we get very little information about those people that are mentioned in Luke.
Mm.
But almost, a large number of those people that are mentioned in Matthew, they're many of those kings of Judah. And you had the good ones, you had the bad ones, you had the bad ones that worshiped the foreign gods and did lots of nasty, murderous things, and but still, that was that lineage. So you don't have this really perfect, glorious lineage. You have a lot of rebels. You have a harlot in there. If you back it up a little bit further, you've got some incest going on. It's not a beautiful, perfect lineage, and that's what I think is the other piece of that. And it's just one of those things you have to step back and think. This is really where he came from, and it wasn't perfect, and we as human beings are not perfect, but yet God can take these people and still turn it. It's like Romans 8:28. All things work for the good of those who love God. For us, that was still God's intention, was to bring Jesus through that lineage, perfect or not. So that's just one of those beautiful things. Comments on that?
My only comment is my head is blown. Just the and I'm being very transparent and honest. It's like the comments you've made in regards to the lineages, that is fascinating to me. But when I just look, because I keep going back in my head to the King James where it says so and so begot so and so begot so and so begot so and so on and so on, and it just it this does make it more, as you said, tolerable, being able to get through it. But again, what you just said about how he'll use anybody, and it's been proven. If you want proof, here it is, that he would take what would I guess society would say is the scum of the earth and use them for his glory and for his purposes.
It was all kinds, because the one king that stands out to me other than King David in there is King Josiah. And King Josiah, now he wasn't perfect, but Josiah did some awesome things. If you read about Josiah's time as king of Judah, it was a time of revival in the land under Josiah. But then you've got others that, they're wicked, they're evil, they're killing people, and they're worshiping these foreign gods, and it was the times of Israel when it's talking about playing the harlot with the Baals and all this other stuff. I mean, those were those kings as well, and that's what I think was part of that subtle hidden intention of these genealogies from both Matthew and Luke, was to kind of show that it's the line of David. I mean, the line is the line, but the Messiah comes from a line that is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination.
Gives us all. It should give us hope.
Oh, absolutely. So past that, then we go back. Matthew references, if you scroll down, right there. So Matthew references that, at least in the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to the Messiah, 14 generations. And again, because he may have been tracking that royal line, again, there are fewer generations that may be mentioned there than what were actually physically in play. So now we get into, again, back to what we consider part of that drama of the birth of Jesus that we're familiar with from our Christmas pageants and stories. If you scroll on down, does it have the Luke 2 on this next page?
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Actually, just for the sake of my voice, does one of y'all mind reading that section?
Go ahead, Mike. You don't care.
Thank you.
In the same region, there were some shepherds staying out in the fields and keeping watch over their flock by night. And an angel of the Lord suddenly stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terribly frightened. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy, which will be for all the people. For today in the city of David there has been born for you a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. This will be a sign for you. You will find a baby wrapped in clothes and laying in a manger." And suddenly there appeared with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among men with whom he is pleased." When the angels had gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds began saying to one another, "Let us go straight to Bethlehem then, and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has made known to us." So they came in a hurry and found their way to Mary and Joseph and the baby as he lay in the manger. When they had seen this, they made known the statement which has been told them about this child. And all who heard it wondered at the things which were told to them by the shepherds. But Mary treasured all these things, pondering them in her heart. The shepherds went back, glorifying and praising God for all that they had heard and seen, just as had been told them.
Okay. So I'm going to throw two questions out there and want to get your thoughts. Number one, where's the star?
I don't know.
Good answer.
Not in this scripture.
Yeah.
Where are the wise men?
Not in this scripture.
Not in this scripture. They're not there. Okay?
Right.
They're not even there on that day.
Right. Yeah.
Okay? So I apologize to everyone that loves their Christmas pageants and nativity scene, that's got the little shepherd boy and the three wise men and all that all grouped up together there, it didn't happen that way.
Right.
Well, when you get real logical about it, I mean, let's think about this. Okay, Mary's human. She just had a baby. I don't think she's going to be riding on a donkey out of town the next day. So, I mean, it wouldn't all happen in one night anyway.
That is true. Not to mention that there's some certain, legal things that have to take place that forces them to stay there for a period of time. So, anyway,
comes a question real quick while we're
here.
Yeah,
what's that?
It says Jacob had a son, Joseph, but Joseph wasn't Mary's husband, was he?
So yes, again, let's go back. So backtracking just a little bit. You want to scroll back up there to that section, and we'll cover this question and then come back.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, so we've got one of two things that's going on here. As again, based on the understanding that we have, and again, both of these are complete speculation. It may be neither one of them. Okay, so we're just having to depend on what we know. So one of these possibilities is that, again, Matthew's tracking the royal line, and that from a royal line standpoint, Jacob may have been in line from a royal line standpoint, but was not the actual physical father of Joseph. Okay, that's a possibility. Again, it was about tracking that royal line. The other possibility, well, there may be three possibilities here. The other is that Joseph was the son of Jacob physically,
Right.
genetically. Okay, that Jacob was his actual father. And that in Luke's, it's referring to Joseph as the son of Eli because Eli may have been Mary's father. And so by being married to Mary, try and say that 3 times fast, by being married to Mary, he was considered the son of Eli. And so, it both may track that as well. But the other possibility is that this could have been a what they call a Levirate situation, where either Eli or Jacob actually died before having a child, and that one or the other is the actual son of Joseph, basically married what is Joseph's mother, and had Joseph. So there's, again, it gets a little crazy, gets a little weird. But those are the 3 most likely possibilities. We just don't know which one it is, or if it's even any of those.
Right.
One of these days, though, we may know.
Yeah.
Are you going to take, when you could die and go to heaven, you take your binder with you? Have it track it down. Say,
you know what? There's going to be, I believe there's some questions I'm going to get answered. I totally believe that. But no, I'm not taking my binder with me with this list of, okay, so tell me what really happened here. No, I don't think I'm going to be real worried about that. I'm just going to be busy worshiping. So
there you go.
So here we have this thing where we've just, pretty much completely obliterated everybody's concept of the nativity. And I apologize for that. But like I said, it did not happen that way. But it's still no less a beautiful thing that is going on here. So we have the Son of God that is born, and who gets told first?
Common folk.
Not some King Herod. They don't get told. No, it's these shepherds.
Yeah,
these shepherds hanging out across the hills near Bethlehem.
Yeah.
And these angels appear and say, guess what? He's here. What y'all been waiting for? He's here. Come and see.
I wonder what was behind that to go to the shepherd guys out on the hillside.
Well, they told people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
but
come and saw, and they told people.
But my argument, I guess, would be, but Sally Joe over here, who's doing, selling her wares on the street, such as, fruit or whatever, or what might be, she would also be one that would be a
Yeah.
person that would tell.
I don't
So
know.
I just wonder if there was any significance to it being these shepherds on the
I mean,
hillside.
there may be something to it, them actually being shepherds.
Metaphorically.
Right,
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
could be.
Mhm.
But the point here,
Hold on.
is he's not telling the high priest, he's not telling the king, he's not telling these rich people
Right.
Right.
hanging around.
He's telling the
He's
common folk.
these lowly shepherds,
Mhm.
and this is who's around Jesus and Mary and Joseph shortly after his birth. And that to me is also a very beautiful thing.
Yeah.
This lends towards the humility, to the meekness of this event.
Well, I mean, I just thought of this that kind of ties in what we just said. The shepherds are watching the flock of sheep, lambs, if you will.
Mhm.
And
Right.
it goes,
That's what I meant by
yeah.
Yeah,
And he goes,
them
the,
shepherds.
I would agree. And here's the thing: we know that the shepherds were told. We don't know that there weren't other people that were told.
That's
Right.
true.
But we know that the shepherds were told. We know the angels appeared to those shepherds. This was recorded. But there may be other things that happen in this that we don't know. We don't know if it was a few people that was gathered around that, or if it was a few dozen people that was
Right.
gathered. We simply do not know. But regardless, what we do know is that this was all going on, and the high priest was oblivious to it. King Herod, at this point, was oblivious to it. Now he's
Right.
not for long, but
Right.
right now he's oblivious to it.
Mhm.
The council of the Jews is oblivious to this going on, and so what you have is you're creating this grassroots rumbling, which has already started, mind you, because again we go back to what's happened with Zacharias and Elizabeth, and there's already been talk going on for a few months with John the Baptist and with the things that had been prophesied by Zacharias. So keep that in mind.
Mhm.
They are literally in this same area where Zacharias and Elizabeth were. So these are some of the same people that have already heard the rumblings from Zacharias's prophecy. And we're not going to get to it tonight. We're already past 8, I see. But we'll see some of the some direct interactions with a couple of people that have been exposed to these rumblings, namely a Simeon and an Anna, that we'll see here shortly. But if y'all are okay with it, I think since we're at 8, this is probably the
Yeah, that's a good place. Good place.
Yeah, it's a good place to stop.
and we'll continue on with the events that happen after his
Let
birth.
my head rest for a while. Like my mom said, this is
It's totally confusing. I get it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, especially the genealogies, they can be very frustrating. But I think as long as you walk away from the genealogies with the two important aspects of that, as far as I'm concerned, that regardless of which genealogy you're reading, both of them declare that Jesus is a descendant of David, which is extremely important to fulfilling those messianic prophecies.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
And the other thing being just the colorful combination of characters that we find in that genealogy that I do believe Matthew and Luke intended for us to see, to show the flaws, if you will, in
Right.
that lineage.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. I know maybe to the listener, it's like Mom said, it's a little confusing. Let me put this up real quick with her last comment. It says, "Well, Joseph's bones were brought out of Egypt when Moses led them out."
Yeah, but that's Joseph, Jacob's son, not the same Joseph. As a matter of fact, that's not even the line of Judah. So Jesus is out of the line of Judah, which was one of the other sons of Jacob.
Right.
Okay, hold on a second. But her earlier comment here.
Oh yeah, okay. So yes, that is probably I get what you're saying there. Okay, and we'll cover this and then we'll stop. So that is very commonly, and this is one of the reasons I brought out the whole thing about the Shealtiel and the Zerubbabel. You remember those were two that make it look like the line came back together, but the reality is that it was very commonplace that if you had a lineage earlier, such as Jacob / Israel and Joseph, it was not uncommon for them to name their children accordingly. So if you had a Jacob that was literally hundreds of years later, that it was not uncommon that they, through some meaning, might name their child accordingly based on a historical genealogy, even though it's not the same line. You know, it is Jacob is the same line because Judah was a son of Jacob as well as Joseph was a son of Jacob. But again, they're in Judah's line. Mary and Joseph were both in Judah's line because David was in Judah's line. But yeah, most likely where she's going there, that has probably been done because Jacob simply wanted to maintain that kind of, if you will, historical naming. Again, very common, and just named his son Joseph like Jacob, way back, son Joseph.
Right.
And they didn't just name their kids because they wanted to. There had significant meaning to the names.
Well, let's just look back at where we were talking about John and the near uproar that happened because
Right.
nobody in Zechariah's family was named John.
Yeah.
That was completely off the wall, and that was so out in left field.
Right.
So yeah, it was extremely important for them to do things like that.
All right, we're going to.
I hope that helps your mom's understanding there. But yeah,
well, if not, I'll hear about it. Then
I'm sure you
we'll
will.
address it next week for sure. But she's not bashful by any means. So that we talk on the phone. Quite a few times.
Let's see her 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. She's certainly got 80% of the commentary tonight.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. She's not bashful.
No, she's not, and that's the way we like it. That's the way we like because it's interaction. It's interaction.
Absolutely.
So anyway, we will pick up next week on from where we're at now. Where are we going? Let's talk about that real quick. Tyler, can you just kind of give us a little teaser of where we're going next?
Yeah. So, I mean, we covered the shepherds. And so where we're going next is that there's some legal things, Jewish law things that they have to fulfill after this birth. Those will be the very next things that we touch on. But the nice thing is in the midst of fulfilling those legal obligations, we're going to see some a little bit of beauty here in the midst of it. And then we'll actually touch on the wise men visit. I don't know, what we'll get to next week, but the wise men visit will come shortly after that. And then after the wise men visit, we have the flight to Egypt where they escape from Herod. And then after that, we come back to Nazareth.
Okay. Keep in mind what we have said on the first part of the show, that if you want to mark your calendars, Mother's Day, which would be, what have I got down there?
May something or other.
May the 14th. May the 14th. And Father's Day, June the 18th. We will not have a show because we want to spend time with our families, and everybody needs to spend time with their families. So just keep those in mind. But we thank everybody for coming in, listening, commenting. We appreciate everybody. And like I said, and anybody who might watch us back on replay or whatever, we appreciate you as well. Please try to share this. You know, if you've got Facebook and you've got tons of friends on Facebook, you know, just click share, and you know, try to get the word out so we can have even more people come in, and sharing the discussion. And as they say, iron sharpens iron. That's kind of what we're doing here. And just to have a better understanding of the Gospels, the depth and the breadth of the Gospels. And so we just appreciate everybody. Catch us next week, same time. Thank you, Lamar. Thank you, Tyler, for, as always, doing, Tyler, you're kind of the spearhead of the discussion with this, and we greatly appreciate that. You're doing a great job, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Awesome
really
stuff.
guiding the study.
Appreciate it.
So until next time, guys, we love you, and check us out next time on the Big Dig Live. See you later.